thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator here at Wheaton Public Library. We are delighted tonight to bring you this program on helping our pollinators, the birds and the bees. Amy Phillips is the DuPage County Program Director for the Conservation Foundation. After working as an architect and sustainability consultant for many years, she made the leap to lend her talents toward conservation programming. Amy focuses her work in DuPage County and manages several programs, including River Sweep, Adopt a Stream, and the DuPage Nature RX Coalition. She's a builder of networks, facilitator of teams, program developer, and has a strong track record of connecting people to nature in ways that are meaningful to them. She has advanced degrees in biomimicry, business administration, and architecture. So please join me in welcoming Amy.
Thank you. Can I do a mic check? Is it working? All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm super excited to be here and share some of the amazing work that we do with the Conservation Foundation, as well as things that you can do in your own yards or in your workplaces to build resilience and help improve our quality of life. And really, when I talk, a lot of this will be about biodiversity, but I want you to take away from this that biodiversity is actually a resilience strategy. It's the way that nature ensures its progression and ensures its survival over long periods of time. So I'm going to give you some information, introduce a little bit of the work we do. I will give you a whole lot of great information on birds and bees and plants and pollinators, and I can go over it quickly. I can go in depth. So if any point I kind of glance over something and you want to know a little bit more about it, just raise your hand. Barry will come over and give you the mic, and I will do my best to answer. And if I can't answer, I will get your information and I'll get it back to you, okay? And then I'm also going to invite you to think about different ways that you could start to do some of this in your own work, in your own life. All right, so how many of you, I guess because we're doing this hybrid, I'm just going to ask the audience, but the people on the hybrid can raise their hands virtually. How many of you have heard of the Conservation Foundation before? Awesome, great audience. How many of you have been to the McDonald Farm before? Okay, very cool. So this is kind of a friendly, I love it. So this is the McDonald Farm. It's in South Naperville. It is a 60-acre working organic farm. It's also where we have our offices. But it's a working organic farm, so it's a farm share, but and that means that you purchase your share in the very beginning. There are still some farm shares available, but you purchase your share in the winter, and then over 20 weeks over the summer, you come every week or every other week and pick up the produce that's grown fresh and organically on the farm, and then you take it home and feed your family fresh, healthy food. We also have all sorts of demonstration from alternative energy and native plants. I don't recommend you come out right now. It's a little muddy. But if you come out in June and July and August, you will see just beautiful demonstrations of what your gardens could look like. So if you have any questions and you're saying, well, I see this, it's this big in the plant store, but what's it going to look like when it's a little older? We have multiple different gardens that we can show you for that. Is it okay? Okay. So again, the Conservation Foundation, we've been around for over 50 years. We are a land trust, which means we try to save land, we save rivers, and we build healthy communities. We foster healthy communities. This is our territory. We started here in DuPage County, actually, I think in Wheaton. We started over 50 years ago and have since expanded to most of our programming areas in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. But we also are currently working in LaSalle and Grundy on the Lower Fox to save and preserve a lot of that land down there. And why do we do this? Why is it important that we spend our lives trying to talk to people about the importance of saving land and also taking your land and making it more biodiverse? Oh, you know what? Oh, you know why? This is a PDF. When I do the original PDF, it kind of shows you what it looked like pre-development, and then it goes, and this is actually what Chicago is projected, the Chicagoland area is projected to look like in 2030. So you can see these great little pockets of green. And what we're trying to do now is not only try to save those, make sure they stay saved as open space, but also start to connect them. And I'll talk to you about a program that we have that will start to help produce that. Again, as Barry said, I was trained as an architect. I know a lot about systems and how the plants all interact and how you can make things great. I am not going to be an insect expert, so I wanted to make sure that you guys knew about this great program that the DuPage Organic Garden Club is having tomorrow in Carroll Stream, and it's all about the disappearance of insects. So if you really want to dive deep into insects and what's going on with them, I really recommend that you take a look at that program. But as far as, you know, why I'm here, why are we concerned about insects? Why are we concerned about bees? You know, there's the pre-development, they had wide range, right? But now with all of the development that's happened in the area, you start to have what they call human wildlife conflicts. So that's everything from deer that get hit on the road, to birds that fly into glass, right? To habitat loss that leads to extinction or very small populations of different animals. So all of these are things that development has caused, and they're things that we can start to improve. And that's what I'd like to really focus on today, is how we can use this idea of creating open space, making this open space biodiverse and healthy and beautiful for the sake of quality of life. And if you have a beautiful backyard, that improves your quality of life. If you have a beautiful park that you can walk to, that improves your quality of life. Guess who else's quality of life it improves? The bees and the birds, right? And your air quality and the wildlife habitat and the water quality and drinking water. How many have heard of No Mow May? Okay, actually not that many. Interesting, okay. How many have heard of No Mow Till Mother's Day? Okay, Lombard, that's their new one. It's super clever. I love it as an entry point. But what I want to make sure when we start talking about No Mow May is that people know when we're talking about No Mow May, we're not saying, here's your chemically treated pesticide in loving yard, and you're just not going to mow it, because grass is a wind pollinated species. There's nothing that a bee can do with grass, right? So we don't want to make people feel like somebody's got their hand raised. I don't know if you have a question. But I don't want you to make it feel like, okay, well, if I put all these chemicals and herbicides and everything else on my lawn, and then I just don't mow it, I'm helping the bees. When we say No Mow May, this is what we're actually wanting. We actually want those flowers, you know, so the dandelions, the clovers, the violets, all of those that come up, that if you mow too early, they won't have a chance to flower. So that's why they say No Mow May or No Mow to Mother's Day. We want to try to get to this idea of sustainable landscaping. And what exactly does that look like? Well, this is actually my house, but you know, I bought the house. This was the beautiful yard that it came with, but over time, I have added oak trees and chokeberries and nodding wild onion and penstemon and what else is in there? And I have all sorts of great plants in there. That doesn't mean that I've taken everything out. There's a couple of boxwoods you can see in there that I didn't take out because I liked them, right? And so that's what we're really trying to talk about, is there's opportunities to add biodiversity, add these plants that attract these bees and birds to your yard, but it's still your yard. You can do what you want with it. And you're going to see I always say my slides are fairly nutrient dense. There's a lot of pictures, a lot of information, but I really just wanted to kind of focus in on this, because this is really important, that by adding biodiverse plants, so lots of different kinds of trees, different kinds of flowers, different kinds of grasses, different kinds of shrubs to your yard, you're going to attract different kinds of animals, different kinds of birds, different kinds of bees. And then that is going to improve not only your quality of life, but those that come to visit. And how we do this is their program called Conservation at Home. The map over on the right is all the different certified yards that are in DuPage County. And again, this is not just DuPage, this is all throughout our service territory. And plus we have affiliates in Cook and Wisconsin and everywhere else. But the importance and the reason why we do this is because we love our forest preserves. They're amazing pockets of oasis of green in DuPage County. But what happens when somebody's over here in Fullersburg and they want to get down here to Waterfall Glen? How do they get there? How does an animal, excuse me, how does an animal get there? Well, you need these kind of corridors. Excuse me. And what your backyards can do and what the pocket parks can do is start to create those pathways and corridors for the animals to be able to find the resources, find the shelter, the food, the water, and the mates that they need to survive. Excuse me. Some of you might have grabbed this flyer. Oh my goodness. I love it when I do this. I start needing water. This flyer is a flyer we put together, and it really kind of gives you ideas about what this conservation home program is. But I'm really going to focus in on the area over here that's starred, really about the planting the native trees and plants. I'm going to focus on that, but I don't want to give you the impression that it's just that, right? It's about composting, it's about rain barrels, it's about different yard practices, it's about trying to save as much land as we can. All of this goes into things that you can do to help install biodiversity and resilience into our communities. All right, so we love this picture. If you ever see anybody from the Conservation Foundation talk about conservation home, you're going to see this photo. And the reason why we love it so much is look at the difference. Like, this is your typical turf grass and trees, right? I see 2 species. How many species do you see over here? Which side do you think is going to provide more habitat? Which side is going to provide more food? Which side is going to be just more interesting to look at, right? So that's what we're trying to show, is that it doesn't have to be the same way it's always been. There's so many opportunities that we have to make things more interesting. These are the non-native species. I always laugh because most of the plants when I bought my house were these plants. Like, these are your builder plants. These are the ones that you can get off of the Home Depot garden stores, right? You can get them anywhere. They're, quite honestly, pretty easy to take care of. Like the hostas, I don't know if anybody's ever killed a hosta. The only way I was able to do it was by getting chickens who ate them before they came up. But honestly, but the problem with these is not that they're not beautiful and not that they're not hardy, right? The animals can't eat them. They don't provide any shelter, and they sometimes poison the animals that eat them, right? So that is the reason why. It's not that these plants are bad. There's no such thing as a bad plant. But the plants that were introduced from Europe, Japan, Asia, they don't feed any of the animals around here. When I used to do youth ed for the Conservation Foundation, we'd talk to kids and we'd say, if there's this whole buffet and you don't know what anything is on it, except there's mac and cheese, what are you going to eat? Right? You're going to eat the mac and cheese. And so these plants, they don't feed the ecosystem. There's that you probably have seen the meme going around that it's like, if something's not eating your plants isn't a part of the ecosystem. And there's some that are fairly harmless. Hostas are harmless. These 2 are not. Have you heard of honeysuckle and buckthorn before? How many people have ever gotten the loppers out and gone, awesome, super fun. We have a program called Mighty Acorns, and we take 3rd through 5th graders out into the forest preserves, and we give them those big loppers and the safety goggles, and they go cut it down. And I tell you, you've never seen happier kids. The problem with these plants, first of all, they're aggressive bullies. We call them bully plants when we talk to kids, but they're aggressive. They will take over and become a monoculture. It's not biodiverse, it's a monoculture. They shade out, especially the honeysuckle. The big problem for that one is it shades out the new oak trees, because the new oak tree babies, the little saplings, they're kind of needy. They need a lot of sun. They need to kind of have the right environment. And when you've got these big shrubs, you'll have old oak stands, but you don't have any of the young ones coming up. So what does that say about resilience, right? What happens when the older trees die and there's nothing to replace them? It's no longer an oak savanna, which is what it is here. It's supposed to be. Buckthorn is particularly problematic because it actually sends a chemical. I have it written on here, but the scroller is in front of it, so I can't remember what the name of it, but it's a chemical that goes into the soil and actually inhibits the growth and can cause problems for aquatic animals like salamanders and things like that. And they're also both laxatives for birds. So you don't want to have a mess in your yard, don't plant those. And then There's also, so those are the kind of the trees and the shrubs, but there are some spring plants that come up. Have you ever pulled garlic mustard? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you're going to be like me, and you're just going to like walk around picking garlic mustard. Sometimes if I can't actually pull the whole plant, or I don't want, there's so much of it, I'll actually just pick off the seeds and kind of put them in my pocket, and then I'll throw them in the garbage. But garlic mustard was introduced from Europe. And, oh, what did I do wrong? Okay. It was introduced from Europe because the leaves actually were used in salads for garlic. Oops, let me go back. And so it actually is an edible plant, but the problem is it's super aggressive. And once you have one, you're going to have a billion of them. Dame's rocket, they actually still sell this in seed mixes and wildflower seed mixes. And it looks just like phlox, not just, but if to someone that knows what phlox looks like and likes it, they might think this is it, but it's not. And the way you know the difference is it's taller and it has 4 petals instead of 5. But this one is, again, also very aggressive. So we talk about the non-native plants. Nothing can eat it. It doesn't help provide shelter. It doesn't feed the ecosystem. But native plants, the reason why they work here is because they have co-evolved with the birds and the caterpillars and the spiders and the fungi and the bees. All of the native animals and flora or all the native animals around here have co-evolved with the native plants. So they can keep them in check. The animals will keep the plants in check if they start to get too aggressive. But the plants will also feed those animals, and they work together with the soil microorganisms, and it's all a system that functions. And the more you're able to plant native plants in your yard, the better it is going to be. It is also, you can tell from the different soil, these are, your hydrangea, there are native hydrangeas, but this is a certain kind of hydrangea. The daylilies, the fountain grasses, and Kentucky bluegrass. I will tell you, I had all of these in my yard at one time. But look at the difference in the root structure. And that root structure, it's not only going to help it access resources, but it's going to stabilize the soil. So those of you that have wet areas, this is why native plants help wet areas of yards, because they will create these channels in the clay. Our soil's pretty clayey. So clay can kind of act like a pan, and it can, not let the water absorb into it. But the native plants with their root structures will go into that clay, create those channels, and be able to hold that water. And then it filters it and yada, yada. All right. If you're going to plant any plants, I got all sorts of resources back there. And I'll talk about conservation home, all that kind of stuff. Oh, there's this really great brochure that we have that has all of these, like if your yard looks like this, and these are the kind of things you can plant and what you can attract and all of that stuff. But these 5 species support 75% of the insect life in our area. So that's your black-eyed Susan or your Rudbeckia. Anybody have black-eyed Susan? Yeah, I got some, and some of the other plants don't like it so much. So the black-eyed Susan's like, that's fine, I'll go there. So I have a lot of black-eyed Susan. Asters, so those are your daisy-like plants with the multiple leaves. Milkweed, we love milkweed, supports the monarch butterflies, right? Oh shoot, that's covered, and now I'm blanking. Goldenrod, that's another kind. And then of course, oak trees, and I'll talk about all of that. So I know you said you had a butterfly garden, right? Does anybody else have a butterfly garden? I've planted those. Oh, you do too. Very cool. So, when we talk about ways to create butterfly gardens, again, it comes back to what does an animal need and what can you provide? The animal needs food, water, and shelter. So this is a pretty picture of it, but what you want to try to make sure is you have a host plant. So each different kind of insect will lay its eggs on a kind of plant, and that's what the caterpillar will eat before it metamorphosizes into being a butterfly. So the host plant is going to be different for each one. I have a slide for that. And then there's nectar plants. So sometimes there's a plant that it lays its eggs on, but then you have all these other kind of species that will help give it that nectar that it needs to feed itself. And then dark rocks are also really good because on really cold days, they can sit on the dark, like if it's cold at night, they'll sit on the dark rock, which will kind of hold that sun's heat into it. It'll kind of help regulate temperature because insects can't regulate their own temperature. And puddlers, which is something I didn't know about, and we did this whole garden at the back at the McDonald farm for the children's garden, and somebody brought in a puddler, and I was like, what are you talking about? But it was basically a bird bath that you put some rocks and some sand in, and then it has some water, the rainwater, and it provides, you know, a place to get some water for the animals, especially if like you're on a farm, there's not a lot of, you know, water rolling around anywhere. So, you know, like to get some water, a place to rest, and some of the minerals from the sand will go into the water that helps the animals stay healthy. All right, everybody knows what this one is? Yeah, so monarch caterpillars. Yeah, so this is what, so milkweed, that's why everybody thinks that milkweed is so important, and because it is the only host plant for monarch caterpillars. Some of the other, like the swallowtails, they might like dill, they might like parsley. There's a lot of different plants it can go to. Monarchs will only lay their eggs on milkweed. And the reason is because it's called milkweed. It's got this white sap that is, it's toxic. So if the bird eats the caterpillar, they may not want to eat it ever again because it's going to make them sick. But there's different kinds. So this is your common milkweed. That's the one that's really tall. I made the mistake of planting that right along my sidewalk. I would not recommend that. I do think it's beautiful. It smells wonderful, but it is really big and something you may want to put in the back or in the corners, right? There's swamp milkweed for wet areas. And then there's the butterfly milkweed. Not remembering what that one is right off the top of my head, but this, the butterfly milkweed, I planted on 2 different sides of my yard. One side, it's thriving. The other side, it's gone. So we were joking at the beginning, you know, you can put the plants where you want them, but they're going to stay where they want to be. You know, there was something about, maybe it's because it was too close to my oak tree and it wasn't getting enough sun. I don't know, but it will not grow over there, but it is just thriving on the other side. Pearl crescents, this kind of butterfly, they love these asters. I mentioned, I don't have a slide for the swallowtails, but I had gotten some dill, like a sapling of dill from, not a sapling, but like, you know, a starter of dill from one of the plant cells. And then I found all of these swallowtail caterpillars on it. It just destroyed the plant. But luckily I work at a farm with a lot of dill, so I'm like, here you go. And I put it on the other dill. Tons and tons of moths. You know, we talk about butterflies, but 90% of that class of animal are actually these different kinds of moths. And all the different plants that you plant will help attract some of these. Okay, so we did talk about bees. Unfortunately, because this is a PDF, this was something that came on, but sometimes, a lot of times people will see both of these animals and think that they're both bees. But these are actually the bees. This is actually a honeybee, but you know, beyond honeybees, there's also hundreds of different kinds of native bees that are so important to the resilience of our ecosystem. Honeybees are actually an introduced species, so you will get people to say that they're non-native and they shouldn't be here, but you know, they produce honey, so they do a good job. But we want to make sure that they're not crowding out our native bees as well. But this guy here, that's the yellow jacket. So every time I hear people talk about, I don't want the bees that come to my picnics. The difference is bees are there for your flowers. They're there for your nectar. They don't want your steak or your potato salad. The yellow jackets and the wasps, they're actually not, they will do some pollination, but they're primarily carnivores. So they're there for the aphids. They're there for all the little critters. There's actually a really interesting wasp that will lay its eggs in the tomato hornworm. So have you ever seen the tomato hornworms? They're like huge, kind of cool looking, kind of cool there. But they will lay their eggs on that, and then the hornworm becomes a host, and it's disgusting. But it's a biological control for a pest that eats your tomatoes. So the reason why I go into this is because all bees, they're not bees. They might be wasps. But if you're planting these native plants with the flowers, the bees are the ones that you're going to attract. You're not going to attract the wasps to them. Now, if you leave your potato salad out of your Coke can, then that's what's going to attract the wasps. All right, cicadas. Who's heard? Who's excited? Who's terrified? I, for one, am excited. I've been here for 15 years, so I've not been a part of this whole thing. So I'm very excited about it. We actually had a guy come to the office yesterday and give us a whole lecture on it, and it was amazing. But so these are your annual guys. These are the guys that come out every year in late summer. And for me, I grew up in St. Louis area, so every time I hear the cicadas, that's summer for me. It's the sound of the singing and the waves that they come and go and all of that. I love the sound of the cicadas. The periodical cicadas are the ones that come out every 17 years. And I know everyone's worried. I had somebody ask at the beginning, what happens when, should I get a tree in the spring or should I wait till the fall? And honestly, it kind of depends, so if you get a little tree, it's not that the cicadas, once they emerge, they don't eat. They're not there to eat, but what they do is lay their eggs in the stems, which will kill the stem. And they don't lay them in the big stems, they lay them in the small ones, right? Shrubs are less of a concern because they grow back up from the soil. But if you have a tree and then you get part of like half of your tree defoliated, then that would become the issue. But these guys live in the ground for 17 years and they live at the base of your big trees. So if you live in an area or in a neighborhood that all the trees are about 5, 10 years old, you don't have to worry. They're not there. They're at your forest preserves. They're at these big stands of large amounts of trees. And the other thing that the guy told us, Dr. Carl, I can't remember his last name right now, that he worked for the Forest Preserve for many years. And the other thing he told us is it's mostly in the east side of the county. So if you live in the west side of the county, there's not a lot of cicadas that are going to come out here. So if you want to go see the cicadas, you want to go to Fullersburg, you want to go to Waterfall Glen. Elmhurst has a whole bunch, and he had a whole story for why that was, and it was because of the train routes. So if you look at the patterns of where cicadas are, they kind of follow the train routes. Fun. So I've talked a lot about landscaping for bees and moths and butterflies, but this is called the bees and the birds. So what are the things you can do to attract and provide shelter and food and nesting and protection for the different kinds of birds that live here? So the one thing I wanted to think about that was that if you plant in layers, again, we're trying to attract biodiversity. So if you plant different layers, if you plant your canopy trees, you have some understory trees, and you have these herbaceous layers, and of course your ground covers, that's going to attract, each one of those is going to attract a different kind of bird, a different kind of moth, a different kind of caterpillar. So all of these guys, if you plant these in these different layers, they will come. So what does that mean? What is a canopy tree, right? A canopy tree, those are our big oaks. Those are the maples. I'll show you some examples of a bunch of different ones, but they have a lot of benefits, right? They will help to, they dissipate the rain. So if you have a big rainstorm that comes, and then the trees will actually hold on to that rain, it'll hold it, it'll break it apart, it'll slow it down. So you will have a lot less flooding and erosion in areas where you have big trees to help kind of break the fall of the rain. Also, of course, reduces air pollution and reduces noise and stabilizes soil, all that good stuff. The main thing to remember if you're talking about a yard in Wheaton is you want to try to make sure that these are planted further away from the house. You want to make sure that they're not under power lines. Again, my house, it's a beautiful old maple right underneath the power line. So every 4 years it comes and just gets chopped like crazy. And the other great thing about canopy trees, especially deciduous canopy trees, is that if you plant them on the south side of your property, that'll actually help shade your windows and help reduce heating load and all that fun stuff in the summer. And of course, we want to encourage oaks. I think at least a couple of municipalities I've been talking to, most of their street trees used to be elms, and then the elms all got replaced with maples. And pretty much the diversity of the street trees are around 30-ish% maples. So then the fear, of course, is what happens when some disease comes that starts to target the maples? Are we just going to replace them all with something else? Or do we start to build in a diverse street tree so that you can have oaks and maples and cherries and all the other kind of fun trees that are out there? Because these are actually keystone species. Has anybody heard of that term before? So a keystone species is that it supports keystone, like the keystone of an arch. It is absolutely essential to the functioning and the health of that particular ecosystem. In the case of an oak tree, there's many different kinds of oaks. They will support, some of them, 500 different kinds of species of plant and animal, fungus and caterpillars and everything else. Bur oaks, this is one of those really big spreading ones that's not a street tree. You definitely don't want to put a bur oak because they're just enormous. Look how big that tree is, but how beautiful. The Hobson oak in Naperville was a bur oak. But they will actually sequester carbon too. And the bigger it is, the more dense and hard wood it is, those are the ones that are going to sequester the most carbon. I've got some metrics up there that you can look at. But there's lots of different kinds. I have a chinkapin. That was the one that I planted, probably a little too close to my house, but we'll see. But like northern oak, and some of them like wet conditions, some of them like dry conditions. You just kind of need to know a little bit more about your soil. And then when you go out and buy the tree, you would know that. Shagbark hickory is another great canopy tree. Oh, it's a little blurry on this photo, unfortunately, but it's called shagbark because it looks like a shaggy dog. It's just the coolest looking tree, but it attracts all of these different kinds because it has nuts and insects. Oh, that's driving me crazy because now you're not, the bottom different one said birds. So if you want to know what kind of birds, well, there's pictures there too, what kind of birds this kind of shagbark hickory will attract, these are the birds that it will attract. Black cherry. When we walk around with kids in the winter, we call it potato chip bark. So it actually looks, if you look at it in the winter, I don't have a picture of the bark, but if you look at it in the winter, it looks like just it's a pattern that just looks like a bunch of potato chips on it. But it attracts the eastern bluebird and the eastern king, and then it's also attracts all these different kinds of insects. All right, so canopy trees, very big trees. But you're going to have parts of your lawn or your area that you either can't fit a canopy tree or, you just don't want one, or you already got one and you're like, I want to have something different. Well, the understory trees are going to be the ones you're going to want to look at. Does anybody have a red bud? Come on. My goodness, go ahead and get red buds. They're the most, in about a week or two, you will start to see these beautiful pink trees. And I adore red buds. I have one in my yard. Apparently, I was going to get one on the other side, and apparently they don't like each other. You're not supposed to have more than one or something. But red buds are gorgeous. American hop hornbeam. Does anybody have that one? I don't have that one, so okay. But either way, those are examples of different kinds of understory trees. Viburnums. I got some nodding heads over there. I have some viburnum on one side of my house. It's getting eaten. There is a pest out there right now that's going after them. Goes after some, but not others. But it's going after one on one side of my house, but not on the other. Go figure. Lots of different awesome birds that attracts as well. And unfortunately, that scroller's in there, so you can't see it. But elderberry. Does anybody have elderberry? Very cool. Yeah, I just planted a couple years ago, and it's right next to my big tree, and so I was all worried about the cicadas, but apparently they grow back up from the bottom, so I don't have to worry about it. I hope it doesn't get that big because it's not that big. I don't have enough room for that. But so it gives these really great berries, and I work with really cool people that know what to do with these berries, and so she told me how to make a syrup out of it. So every time, and it's got what's the word? It's immunosupport. There's a word for it. The what? Well, it's antioxidants, yes, but it's like whenever you get sick, you take something that boosts your immune system, and I'm totally blanking. But I made elderberry syrup. So every time I started to feel like I was getting a little scratchy throat or something, I just start having some sips of that. It worked until I ran out of it, but I'm hoping that the elderberries produce a little bit more. But red belly woodpeckers, come on. And then, okay, so you've got your canopy, your understory, and then you've got your herbaceous layer. And look at all these ground nesting birds that are so important for that layer. I know the red-winged blackbird is another one that loves to nest in the prairies, especially. Can be a little aggressive. But these are spring ephemerals. This is actually my favorite time of year whenever the bluebells start coming up, and I've got some bluebell and some wild geranium. I have some phlox, but it doesn't seem super happy right now. And then I've also got a bunch of that fern. But these are all different kind of plants that you can plant. That the reason why the spring ephemerals come up early is because they co-evolved alongside these canopy trees like the oaks, and the oaks leaf out much later, like in June. So what these plants do, they learned, okay, if I get up early, I set flower, I set seed, I can go back to sleep, and then I'm good until next year. And in the meantime, we get some beautiful displays right about now. Native ground covers too, sedge and wild ginger. I've had more luck with the ginger than the sedge. But I know a lot of people, again, I always say, like, I'm an organic gardener by neglect. I'm going to plant something, and if it survives, it survives. And if it doesn't, I'll figure it out. So, but these are also really, especially this wild ginger, I've been really happy with what that looks like as a ground cover. Adding natives. So these are all just, if you have maybe some daylilies, maybe you want to swap it out for some coreopsis. Maybe you've got something. The one thing great about butterfly weed is it's small, it's tame, doesn't take over, just kind of sits there. All of these different kinds of plants are beautiful landscaping plants. You can plant them because you like them, not just because of all the benefits I've talked about, but you plant them because they're pretty and you like what they look like. And I've talked a little bit about our conservation home certification program. I've got some brochures in the back, and I've also got, there it is, a QR code. So if anybody's tech savvy and wants to do a QR, what we do, I'll pass this around if anybody wants to look at it. What we do is we have some partial funding from the DuPage County Stormwater Management. So we provide free yard assessments. So we will, if you have a wet area, or you just want some advice on, I can't figure out what to grow here. We have experts that will come to your house, have a conversation, a consultation with you for free, and give you some advice. And we'll also give you some resources like, oh, these are when the plant sales are going to be, and this is where you can go get this kind of thing. Or you don't know where to get this. Well, have you considered this? Or, hey, why don't you go talk to this person who got 2 blocks over that got their yard certified, and they could give you some advice. So it's really about connecting homeowners, giving them some education, but then also celebrating that education. So celebrating the hard work by having this beautiful plaque for the conservation at home. And then you get to proudly display it in your yard. And then people say, what's that? And then you can tell them all about the work you've done and all the hard work you've put into it. And has anybody heard of the term biophilia before? Okay, so this is new. So bio meaning life, philia meaning love, right? So this is the love of life. And this is something that multiple studies have proved is innate in us. We love to have views to nature. We love to feel the sun on our face. We love to be outside and smell the fresh earth after a rain. It is part of how we're built. And so this love of nature, this way of providing this info, I talked at the beginning about quality of life. Having that idea, bringing these different kinds of plants and inviting these different insects and birds and all these animals to your yard is a way of improving your quality of life, because we need this. We need to have that connection with the outdoors, and we need to be there. So I said I was going to give you some information. That was a lot of information. I'm happy to answer questions, but I also am going to invite you to, we have a plant sale coming up on May 11th. I've got some flyers in the back if anybody wants to take them home with them. These are garden plants, and these are going to be your native flowers and grasses. We don't do trees and shrubs at this sale, so it's more the flowers, the grasses, and of course, the all-important garden plants. So if you're interested, it's gonna be on May 11th. Oh, see, there's a QR code for that too, but it's blocked. So I think I need to switch my slides around a little bit so I don't have so much quite in the middle, maybe. We also have lots of volunteer opportunities. So if you are really just want to get your hands dirty and come and help weed at the farm or volunteer in any sort of way, we've got all sorts we've got work sites, we've got different ideas. So if anybody is interested in that, let me know and I'll let you know. I've also got some brochures and a poster for the river sweep. Has anybody participated in river sweep before? Okay, so river sweep is a 1-day volunteer river cleanup where we sweep our rivers clean. So in DuPage County only, although there's a couple sites in Will. But this is the 33rd year we've been running it. Last year we had almost 800 volunteers, 28 different sites all around DuPage County. These are all the different sites. So this is the West Branch, this is the East Branch, this is Salt Creek. So yeah, so if you're interested in registering for that, I ask for registration because I need to know how many people and where to put them. So if you're interested, it's just our website, the Conservation Foundation /sweep. And again, there's stuff in the back for that too. But it's just a really amazing program. It's been going for 33 years, and so I'm super excited to help keep that going. I talked about the farm stand. There are farm shares that are still available if you're interested in that. We have our big Earth Day benefit dinner coming up on April 25th. Super fun, great people. If you're interested in that, I can it's just /benefit. And you can become a member. and follow us on social media. So that is the crux of my program. And I'm hoping you have questions, and I'm really hoping I have answers to them.
Great.
So
Thank you so much, Amy. Let's start as we're all thinking of our questions. Let's start with this one from our virtual audience.
Oh, sure.
Do you have any helpful hints about restarting buffalo grass?
No. I've never tried to grow buffalo grass. I have a former colleague that has. It needs to be in full sun. And a lot of times people try to, again, plants grow, and I have a very important mentor to me that has said that plants grow in areas to which they are adapted. So if you try to put a plant in an area it doesn't want to be, it's not going to live there. I have heard that buffalo grass is a little bit difficult. But I know that if you put it in full sun, that is where you're going to get your best results for it. I'm not sure what she means by restarting, like maybe it just didn't want to be there. You know, I've got a lot of plants that I planted and then they did not come back. And I just figured it means that it wasn't the right area for it.
Okay, there's also a comment about rabbits really going after the hostas. And maybe you can just maybe give us some hints about how to keep rabbits away from new plants that we're trying to encourage.
New plants. All right, I'm not going to give you hints on how to keep them away from hostas because hostas need to go away. But I will actually encourage people to dig their hostas up and replace them with some of these other plants. You know, I've had issues with my own yard where it's not so much the herbaceous, like the perennials that die back and come back every year. I don't really have rabbit pressure so much with those, especially with the native plants. I've not seen any issues with it all. The ones I do protect are my new shrubs, just because the rabbits seem to get pretty hungry around now, like before the food really comes out. And I think it's a timing issue. So right now is when, if you've got some shrubs that are kind of new and they're kind of small, those are pretty tasty to the rabbits. So I just have bunny fences. So I just have these little bunny fences that I put up around them. I mean, if the rabbit really wanted to get into it, it could, but usually it just kind of goes somewhere else because there's food everywhere. But I've not had any issues with rabbit pressure on my perennials because by the time they come out, the rabbits already have so much other food that I just think they don't eat it.
Okay, great. And just a reminder that there will be a follow-up email tonight, and I'll include the links to the Conservation Foundation's website, as well as the link to request a home visit.
Thank you.
So those, again, in the in-person audience, if you want to be thinking of your questions and raise your hand, but I'll read this additional one from the virtual folks. What ground cover grows best in the shade?
The two that I showed there. So wild ginger, I can go back to it. Oops, I went too far. These guys. So wild ginger is a shade plant, and that's a great ground cover. And these also. So these were oak sedges. They were plants that co-evolved with oak trees. So they're okay having shade. The difference between an oak tree shade, if you've sat underneath an oak tree, you will know it's more dappled shade, right? It's more dappled light. Plants that live underneath oak trees, they're not in a cave, right? So again, I inherited a lot with my house. I have a Norway maple. There's no sun that gets through underneath the Norway maple. It is almost like you put an umbrella up. So getting anything to grow under there is a big challenge. But if you have an area that is under an oak tree or something that, you know, gets partial sun, that dappled sunlight, these are your two ground covers that are really going to thrive in that area. It's very hard to find something to grow on the north side of your house, for example. It's very hard to find something to grow underneath a Norway maple, and I have both. So I will say that I've got a little planter on the north side of my house. I've got a bunch of spring ephemerals in there, so the bluebells love it. The wild geranium might be happy there. We'll have to see how it does. The sedge doesn't like it. I've planted sedges there and they don't come back because it is the north side of my house. It literally doesn't get any sun until like June because the sun does this. But just a little bit, ferns. Ferns love it there. They'll grow anywhere. So these like native ferns, If you have an area that you just like, I can't get anything to grow, they won't grow underneath the Norway maple, but they will grow on the north side of my house. If anybody has suggestions on what will grow underneath the Norway maple, please see me because I have no idea.
All right, thank you. Good ideas. Any other questions? Yeah, just
I have two questions.
She was going, yeah.
Thank you. Around in the neighborhoods now, I see these little blue flowers coming up, and they're usually in maybe a little rocky area, not a lawn. What are they, and how do they grow?
The little blue flowers?
The little blue ones that come up, they're the first ones.
I think they're just violets. That's my understanding. No, they're not. Okay, do you have the answer? Because say it again.
They're scillas.
Scillas.
SCILLAS, I think.
Okay.
They're a bulb.
Okay.
They just think scillas.
Okay.
And they'll cover the ground in certain areas. I mean,
You have to plant every single bulb though, right?
yeah, but that's multiplying over the years.
Oh, they do multiply. Okay. Yeah, okay.
So I think you plant them in the fall and the little bulb. Second question.
Not native.
And there might be a third, I don't know. If you could get everybody in this room who presumably has a garden or a yard to plant a flower, a weed, something, what would you ask us all to plant? What would be your
I would tell you
choice?
to plant an oak tree. That's not the answer to your question. But if you have the ability to get an oak tree in your yard, please plant oak trees. They're so, so important.
Okay.
As far as a plant or a flower, it comes down to what do you want? You know, what are your aesthetics? I will tell you what I like, but that doesn't mean I have a friend that used to do sales and she was like, don't yuck somebody else's yum. You know, I'll yuck your hostas, that's fine. But, you know, as far as like, I personally love the purple cone flowers. I love the butterfly milkweed. I love my prairie dropseed. It's a little mounded grass. It stays put. It doesn't give me any trouble. I love it. You know, I've got choke cherry. That's a little big. I've got some native hostas. If you want me to pick one, it's like trying to pick my favorite kid. I will tell you what I like, but you know, it really comes down to personal taste.
Or fit it to the situation, you know.
Yes.
what you have.
Yeah. If you have I don't have a wet yard. And so if I talk to people that have a very wet yard, their plant palette is going to be very different than my plant palette, which is pretty dry. So I can get certain things to grow, and then I can't get others to grow because they like it wetter. Or, you know, there's just plants grow in areas to which they're adapted. What was the other one? Yeah, I have some hydrangeas. Oh, the one I told you about my mistake. If any of you have known people that have been planting plants like this or gardening for years, they will tell you all about the things that they did that they're like, please don't do that. So my common milkweed by my sidewalk was one, don't do that. And then the other one was nodding wild onion by a pathway. Don't do that. I love my nodding wild onion. It's a great plant. It needs to be over in an area because it just reseeds. And it's a great plant. I have no issues with the plant, but I'm always like pulling little onion saplings everywhere, or seedlings everywhere by this pathway. And so, yeah, that was a mistake. If you get columbine, I love columbine. It's a great plant because it's great for right by your house because it's kind of mounded. It doesn't get really big. It has really tall flowers that are red. Deadhead those flowers. I didn't do that the first year, and then all of a sudden I had columbine everywhere. So now I know as soon as the flowers are about to go to seed, I cut them off and I actually take them and throw them in the other side of the yard that I want columbine to grow in. You know, so you live and learn. There's lots of mistakes that I've made, and I'm happy to pass that on. And that's also why the Conservation Home Program is interesting, is because we do try to connect different homeowners to each other so that you can learn from one another. I know a lot about the native plants, but like the non-native bulbs and things, I don't know much about them at all. So, but other homeowners might, yeah.
So what is the best way to dispose of invasive species that you do dig up? You don't want that with your compost. What do you do with it?
It depends. If you're talking about garlic mustard, for example, the main thing is that you want to deadhead the seed or the flower. So you can actually go through. Sometimes I said the anecdote, like when I'm walking in the pathways or something and I see garlic mustard, sometimes if I can't pull the whole plant, I'll just kind of deadhead the flowers and put them in my pocket. There is still the chance that they might produce another flower. It's probably won't happen, but it might. Other times what I've seen people do is they pull the whole plant, they take the flower and the seed, you have to put that in a trash can, but the actual stem and roots and leaves, they're not going to harm anything. So you could either compost them or you could just leave them on the side of a pathway without any harm at all. Are you talking like woody invasives, or are you just talking mostly about the? Yeah, if you pull them, you don't even have to compost them. You could just pull and drop. So what's an example? There's so many different weeds that come up, but like there's was one weed that if you just kind of pull it up and you leave it on top of the mulch with the roots exposed, it'll just die and shrivel up and biodegrade and go back into the soil. It's not going to hurt anything. The only thing you have to worry about is if there's flowers that could potential or seeds. That is when you definitely don't want to put those in your compost, and you definitely don't want to leave those on the ground. Things like garlic mustard, if you pull the whole plant and just leave it with the flowers on it, it will still pull the energy up to set that fruit even after it's already died.
And speaking of the woody invasive, so buckthorn or something like that, what would you do with that at that point?
You have to have it removed. You can chip it. You can, the main thing is the trick with that is if it's got berries on it, you can't really chip it. I think a lot of times they burn it, I mean, what you would do as a homeowner, if you have a buckthorn tree, you would pay somebody to remove it for you and they would know what to do with it. The forest preserves, I think typically they will burn it. They'll make stockpiles and burn.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, just a reminder that I will send out the links to the Conservation Foundation's website, as well as how to get a home visit with you in the follow-up email later tonight. If you are watching this recording and would like those links, just email me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE for community engagement at wheatonlibrary.org. But I think that's it for tonight. So thank you so much, Amy. We certainly appreciate your time and all your expertise, and we hope to see everyone again soon.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.